Yeah, I was an atheist for much of my life, became a Christian because of the evidence for an historical miracle, the resurrection of Jesus, but then wondered, is God still in the miracle business today?
Yeah.
That led me to research this book, and that's how I encountered Barbara Snyder.
Yeah, tell me about her.
It was the most fascinating case I encountered, John. Barbara Snyder was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis as a teenager. Many people live with that illness quite successfully. She did not. She deteriorated very quickly. She had multiple surgeries. She would continually get pneumonia. It got to the point where several years later, the doctor said, look, there's nothing we can do.
She only had one lung that was functional.
That's right. They said, next time you get pneumonia, why don't we just let you die, because otherwise we're postponing the inevitable. So they put her in hospice in her home. So here she is in a bed in her home. As you said, one lung is non-functional, the other's only 50%.
Talk about her feet.
Yeah, her feet, and she's kind of curled up like a pretzel. Her feet were extended like this. Her fingers were touching her wrists. She was rigid and so forth. She had a tube in her throat that was connected to oxygen canisters in the garage so she could breathe.
So she could breathe?
She was blind. She could just see gray shapes. Her urination and bowels were non-functional. And they just basically were waiting for her to die.
Yeah.
Now, a couple of friends, she was a Christian.
Yeah.
A couple of friends of hers called WMBI, the Christian radio station in Chicago, and said, would you just ask your listeners to pray for Barbara? She's on the edge of death.
Yeah.
In fact, one doctor said she was the most hopelessly ill patient I'd ever encountered. So they put out the word. Well, we documented that at least 480 Christians began praying for Barbara, because that's how many wrote her to say, I'm praying for you.
I'm praying for you.
Right. So it's Pentecost Sunday. She's in bed. Two of her friends are in her room reading some of these letters from people praying for her. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Barbara hears a voice.
Yeah.
Comes from the corner of the room where nobody was, and the voice said, get up, my child, and walk. Now, I mean,
She's got a tube right into her throat. She can't talk.
exactly. She has to take out the tube to say, God just told me to walk, get up and walk and go get my parents. I want my parents here. And they went out, but she doesn't wait. She jumps out of bed. And she stands on the floor, and her feet are flat and her hands unfold. And
what's the first thing she recognizes?
well, the third,
My feet are flat.
Yeah, that's right. My feet are flat. I can actually stand. She hadn't walked in 7 years. Her hands unfolded, and then she said, "Oh, and I can see again." So you think that'd be the first thing she'd
She's been blind
realize?
for all these years.
That's right. So her mother comes running in, grabs her legs, and says, "Your calves are back.
You got muscles.
You have muscles." The atrophy had gone away in her legs from not having walked for so many years. Her dad walked in and waltzed with her around the room. She was instantly and totally healed. That night, there was a service at her church, a Wesleyan
Wheaton
church.
Wesleyan?
Yep, in Chicago area. And the pastor gets up and he says, does anybody have any announcements? And Barbara comes walking down the center aisle.
Walking down the center aisle.
And the church, who had never seen Barbara for years except in a wheelchair, just spontaneously broke out in singing Amazing Grace. I once was blind and now I see.
Yep.
The next day, she goes to one of her doctors.
Dr. Thomas Marshall.
That's right, an internist for 30 years. And he said later, when I saw her walking down the hallway toward me, my first thought was, oh, she died and that's a ghost. Because he said, and these are his words, he said, this is medically impossible. Two doctors ended up writing about this in their books, calling it a miracle. There is no natural explanation for what happened to Barbara Snyder.
Yeah, I also like Dr. Marshall, who said, I've never witnessed anything like this before or since, and considered it a rare privilege to observe the hand of God performing a true miracle.